Deep conversations with the right people are priceless, and ideas are formed in the crucible of authentic, connected, and sometimes controversial conversations. No ideas are off the table because why would they be? Join us on Inquisitive Souls as we lead with curiosity, empathy, and a massive heaping of juvenile humor. Join us on this learning journey. All right, before we saddle up, I want to tell you about the Dad Edge Alliance, which is my absolute favorite community on the whole entire internet. It's a group of, at the time of my recording, it's about 250 guys. It's growing all the time, but it is a community unlike anything I've ever seen. And I don't know if you could hear that thunder that just happened, but that is a sign that what I'm saying is truly, truly important. That's right. Thunder. Thunder happened when I'm talking about the Dad Edge Alliance. So listen, if you're a guy and you are feeling like your friendships or your relationships are superficial, you get around, you shoot the shit, but you're never going deeper. You don't feel safe to do that. And you know that there's something more. I'm telling you, join this community. It is insanely life-changing. Okay. Like we got guys in there from all walks of life. But they all have one thing in common. They're trying to elevate fatherhood by improving themselves. They're leaning in. They're supporting each other. They're learning from one another. They're learning about themselves. They're challenging themselves. They're setting goals. They're holding each other accountable. But they are all doing it in a place that's totally safe and totally just overflowing with bro love. And I'm trying to say that in a manly way. Bro love, right? So, one of the things that I've learned throughout my own personal development journey, which is a journey that will last the rest of my life, obviously, is that the people you surround yourself with that's one of the most important choices you can make. Many of you have probably heard the quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And when I first heard that, logically, I got it. Okay, that makes sense. But I never could have imagined what it actually meant. How transformative it is to get a better, higher caliber, more open, loving, caring, relentless group of men in your life. So that's what this fucking community provides. I mean, I don't know how to state it in a way that really truly conveys how I feel about it. Maybe I'll just say fuck a lot more. But I mean, the stuff that goes on here is crazy. They've got community calls. They've got accountability teams. They've got amazing content, free books. We're building courses. We have experts come in, New York Times bestselling authors, Navy SEALs to speak to the guys. And the guys are learning and they're growing and they're building relationships with one another and they're bringing a better version of themselves into every aspect of their life. So please think about it. Look around you. Do you have the group of people around you that are going to help you create the fucking life you want? Most people don't. Most people don't even know there's an alternative. And most people don't even understand how important it is. So I'm telling you from my own personal experience and witnessing hundreds of people have the same experience, it changes everything. Okay, so listen, if you want to know more, you can either always send me a message or you can go to gooddadproject.com/alliance and I'll put that link in the show notes page. Do it. And it will help you become emotionally fucking excellent. Now on to the show. So Mo Mondays, which is an organization that gives speakers, not non-professional speakers, gives speakers a chance to share their stories. And I think their slogan is something like, you meet the nicest people at Mo Mondays. And this podcast interview is confirmation that slogan is more than just a slogan. So as we talk about, Josh and I met at a Mo Mondays. We both were speaking at the same thing. And we ended up having a pretty short but cool conversation afterwards. And then a year or two, I think it was actually last year. We said 2 years, but I think it was last year. We finally hooked up and recorded a podcast. And so it's all about grief dreams. We get off on a couple different tangents, which is really interesting, but Josh is a really cool dude. And I really, really enjoyed talking to him. So I'm going to give you Josh's bio. and then we'll get right into it. So his research interests are in the area of grief dreams with a special focus on dreams of the deceased. He's currently in his PhD at Brock University and just about to finish that up, actually. He's continuing to investigate grief dreams and will be graduating in the fall. Josh has published scientific literature in this area and is considered one of the leading researchers in this field. To raise awareness on this topic, Josh wrote a children's book, Dreaming of Owl, that can be found on Amazon. Hey, I didn't know that. We didn't talk about that in the podcast. Additionally, he started a website, griefdreams.ca, Instagram and Twitter account, a Grief Dreams Facebook group, and a Grief Dreams podcast. So enjoy, without further ado, enjoy the show, and good luck on your defense of your PhD thesis, Josh. I'm sure you're going to crush it, and because you are living a life in which you just take things as they come, and I absolutely love that. So enjoy, everybody. Hey, Josh, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were just talking microphones here. So it's funny. I actually didn't, my cable got screwed up. Oh, no, I feel like it might be happening right now. Do I still sound the same?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay, we're keeping it real here. But I lost my train of thought there. Actually, never mind. I know what I was saying. So I had my mic and the cable got screwed up on it. And it would make me sound like Darth Vader. Actually, not really Darth Vader, but more like a hostage, like a hostage taker when they try to alter their voice.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a good, I mean, it actually sounded probably better, but regardless, be that as it may, we're good to go. So anyways, where did we met at a Mo Mondays, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah. Way back when. It was about 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I was talking about mental health and vulnerability. And then you came up to me afterwards. And I think it was because I was talking about dreams. And I know that's something that's really interesting to you. And I'd love to get into that because my wife is like this. I don't know if she does like lucid dreaming, but man, she remembers all her dreams. Like, it's crazy. And I wake up and basically feel like the last 8 hours have been a void. I hardly ever dream. So yeah, I guess let's talk about that. I mean, I guess what is the kind of work that you do and what is it that's so interesting about it?
Well, everyone loves talking about dreams. Once you bring up that topic, people really don't want to stop. Right. And so what's cool about the topic is, well, for me, like, I'm making meaning out of my loss. And I should mention what I'm doing. So I've been doing research for the last, 8 years.
Oh, really?
So I did my master's and then I'm just finishing up my PhD now at Brock University. And I'm looking at dreams people have of their deceased loved ones. And so I call these grief dreams. And when people talk about dreams and they talk about grief, this is like what they really want to talk about, just because a lot of people don't really know anything about the topic. There hasn't been a lot of research in the area. And so I'm one of the pioneers in trying to figure out what's going on here, because they seem to be, for the most part, most people have very comforting dreams that really change them in ways that like we can't change people in waking life. There's something that goes on in these dreams that are just really profound on the grief journey. So yeah, well, we can talk about that some more. But yeah, that's sort of basically what I'm doing. And so talking about dreams is a pleasure of mine, not only because of the work I do, but like I had a couple profound dreams before I got into this topic, that shifted my understanding of what dreams were. I think that's really what I talked about the Mo Mondays, if I can recall correctly. Yeah. So, we can talk about that some more. But I think I remember for the Mo Mondays, didn't you say something about dreams?
Yes.
Because I remember on stage you mentioned, because I went before you, and then when you went on, you mentioned something about dreams. So I came up to you afterwards. I think of was it your wife, right?
No, yeah. So it was my first wife, and she ended up taking her own life after a long battle with mental health issues. And I've had some really interesting dreams, but I think for me, and it doesn't really happen anymore, but for me, the dreams were always deeply unsettling. And they were typically dreams like related to, her coming back to life and screwing up my life now, actually. And so I would wake up and, and they were very, like, normally I don't I don't know. I just maybe I don't know. I'd love to talk to you about this. But I don't really typically dream very vividly. Or maybe I don't know. Maybe I do, and I just can't remember it. But those dreams were super super vivid, and I would wake up and like pretty upset. And for a bunch of different reasons. I mean, one of them was like, oh my God, what if that actually happened? Then there's the other one was like, why am I dreaming about, like, why am I so upset about the idea of her coming back to life? Like, I think it was all part of my journey through grief, I guess. But yeah, that was what was kind of happening with me.
Yeah, I remember, and so we never actually got a chance to talk about it. So it's cool that I'm actually hearing about this dream now. And yeah, it's funny how these dreams really can mimic where we are in a grief journey. The negative ones, especially, but also the positive ones. There's a lot in it that can give us insights onto what we're dealing with, maybe that we can't articulate in waking life. And these negative dreams, anyways, in my research, was finding that it's definitely related to trauma or guilt or regret or some kind of blame. So there's always this, when these negative dreams of the deceased is actually less common than the positive dreams. And so it's interesting because just in dream research, I'll just share a little on that. Dreams represent our waking life. And, when in regular life, when we're dreaming, we tend to have, on average, more negative dreams just because we like to worry and have so much fear about, what tomorrow brings. And so that creeps into our dreams. Or, it's Halloween time. So a lot of those movies also will creep into your dreams. Gremlins and all that. But then, like what's interesting though is after trauma, they become even more negative, right? So because you're dealing with a lot. But for whatever reason, when the deceased is in the dream, these grief dreams, they tend to be more positive. So it's more rare to have these negative dreams, which is counterintuitive to the research, which makes them very special. And there's something interesting about them. As you said, right, this one was vivid. And like your dreams aren't normally vivid. It's like, what's going on there? What's going inside there for you to not only remember that dream, but also for it to be a little different than what you normally would have dreamt of. But yeah, the dream you had was very interesting in the sense of, like where you were. So what do you think that was representing in your journey?
So I noticed that one thing that's happened with me is that, I would, as I kind of, so first of all, I think I definitely had more of them before I really allowed myself to grieve in the first place. So, I mean, I've told this story a million times, and I actually probably told it that night at Mo Mondays. But like I was drinking heavily, and so and I really hadn't like allowed myself to grieve. I didn't realize that the whole reason I was drinking was because I had been deeply hurt and didn't even really realize that. But regardless, so I think that was part. I think part of it, I don't know. I mean, maybe part of it was the fact that I hadn't allowed myself to grieve. And this was my subconscious, I don't know, maybe that was related. But I noticed that as I've healed, it just doesn't really seem to happen anymore. However, I would say too, though, that part of in a situation like this, and I'm sure it's pretty common for people who have lost a loved one or spouse or partner, is that you get presented with these weird hypothetical situations that are almost irreconcilable. Like, so for example, and for me, they've usually been around like, realizing, so an example would be Cindy was labeled as having bipolar disorder. And I know now, just by learning and research, and there's no way she had bipolar disorder. She was having emotionally driven responses to the trauma she experienced as a kid. But regardless, so I realized that, and I'm like, oh my God, like if we had known that, she would still be alive. She could still be alive. And then I have this thought where, oh my God, but I wouldn't want her to be alive because I have this great life now. And then I think, oh my God, I'm such an asshole for even thinking that in the first place. And then, so I noticed that as I would have, like, I feel like now that we're talking about it, the dreams I had and the thoughts I had were almost not related. Like I would have a thought like that and then have a dream, but they were at similar phases, I guess, in my healing journey,
So that's interesting. So just as you're talking, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, so your dream, when she came back to basically and that would like ruin your life, you're almost feeling relief she was dead in a way. Like you're
Yeah.
having more joy, or something was going on that was actually more pleasurable than when she was around. And it was probably causing a lot of conflict inside because you're grieving, but at the same time, you're doing things you didn't get a chance to do when she was alive. And that's the grief journey, right? Like there's these dichotomies are going on inside, and you feel bad when you have those thoughts. But like it was true. It's absolutely true. But it's also really sad that she had to die too.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting. So you mentioned at the beginning that you had a couple of pretty significant personal experiences related to dreams that caused you to go down this line of education and research.
Yeah. So it's interesting. When I was a kid, going way back, I would have a lot of nightmares growing up, and my parents always used to say it was the devil. So I grew up in a very Christian home, and there was a response to most things that they did.
Oh my God, how terrifying is that? Like the devil will haunt your dreams?
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. So I didn't like having those, right? And it's interesting looking back, because then I don't remember dreaming, because I believe, because we have our minds are really good at allowing ourselves to remember dreams or not. And so throughout a whole period, I don't remember dreaming as a kid. Like I remember early on, but I don't remember after that. And I think because I had the idea that it was the devil, right? Like they're telling me it was, so it must be true. I look up to them, right, as parents. And so I don't remember dreaming at all or valuing dreams at all. So I basically, until, when was it? Right after first year university. That's when it was. I had my first dream that like really changed my perspective on dreams, but also life itself. And it was the first time I knew, or I could interpret a dream. So before then, you said like it was a devil or just like some random stuff like you didn't really care too much about. So I'll tell you the dream. It's I think it's the one I told them on Mondays too. So I was suffering a breakup. So I was madly in love as a high school kid. And then what happened was, found out that the girl I was dating at the time, she opened up and said that she cheated on me, and she found she was with someone new, because we went to different universities. And I completely lost my shit. Can we swear here?
Oh, you're fucking right, man.
I thought it was you, so I thought it was okay. And so I completely lost it. I emotionally broke down. I was so angry. I was so angry. I don't know if it's probably the angriest I've ever been in my life. And I didn't understand where the pain and suffering was coming from. I was crying. I didn't eat or sleep for like 2 or 3 days. It was absolutely a devastating blow to who I was. And so being from a Christian home, and at that time, not really being Christian in that sense, just because of who the family surroundings was. And essentially it was very, it was violent and very chaotic. And it's hard to believe in something like a God when all that stuff was going on. But anyways, I said, I'll take a shot at this. So I said, Lord, if you're out there, if you,
this is like a Hail Mary, pardon the pun.
Hail Mary. Let's see if this works. I said, tell me why I'm suffering so much. And so it's interesting. I asked that question rather than take away my pain. I was curious on why it was suffering, because I've never felt this much suffering in my life. And so I'm like, why am I suffering like this? So anyways, I had the best sleep that night, and I woke up and I had this dream. And so what the dream was I was this reporter, and I was following this stream, and I was going over hills and valleys and going underneath bridges, and it felt like forever. It felt like I was in this dream for 10 hours, and just like going around. And then finally I followed the river to this ocean, and I look, and there is a man standing at a pier a distance away. So I run over there, and I walk up to the man, or run up to the man and say, where is it? Where is it? Like frantically looking for something. And he calmly looks at me, and then he looks out to the ocean and says, it could be over there, pointing to the left of the ocean. And then he said, it could be over there, pointing to the right. He said, it could be over there, pointing straight out to the sea. And then he looked at me very these stoic eyes, like I guess a Yoda would. And he said, but you know where it truly is? And then he pointed to his mind. And then I burst up from being awake with like a bolt of lightning, and there's this almost this peace was within inside me, but it was just this feeling I've never felt before. Not only was I feeling this sense of peace from this deep sense of sorrow, but also I understood what the dream meant, which was crazy to me that dreams even meant anything. I thought they were always the devil, right? So there's like, it was a double whammy right there. And it was absolutely insane for me. Like, it really was perplexing that I knew what this dream meant. And I'll tell you what what I woke up with knowing. And so what he was referring to was the way I was looking at the whole situation of her cheating and the whole relationship breaking up was that was her fault and it was his fault, because they were both accomplices and I was the victim, right? And the issue was actually I was wrong. That's not, well, yeah, it happened, and from one perspective that's true, but from a different perspective, something else was true, and it was that I didn't love myself. And because I didn't love myself, when she was involved in the relationship with me, that's when I loved myself the most. So when she cheated, which is a big betrayal, but also left, I was left with myself. And that whole transition from being madly in love to being alone with myself that's what was causing me the suffering. And so for me, it was absolutely crazy that it was actually my fault in a way that I was feeling this way. And I said, damn it, like, what the hell? Like, how did this happen? Like, it switched 180 on me. So I said, how the hell can I love myself then? I don't ever want to feel like this again. And so the way it goes is I went on a mission to try to figure out how to love myself. And the first place I started, since I prayed and this happened, I went to look at the Gospels of like Jesus, the 4 Gospels that were talked about, like with Jesus and all the different people who like had dreams in the Bible, like Joseph and Daniel. And I learned a lot about, first of all, what the pastor never talked about. And then second was some insights onto things I can work on, that I could work on to help me along this journey of love, since I didn't really know anyone around me that was a pinnacle of love. Like everyone has their issues and everyone was sending me in different directions, but no one could actually just be in that place of love that I was seeking. Because when I tell them about the cheating story, they feel bad for me. And like, so and then if they said it, like, and a lot of times they say, if that happened to me, I'd be so angry. Well, that tells me you're on that same perspective I was. So you're no help, right? Like there's no help for me here, because I'm looking at it from a different perspective now on sort of what is it inside me and what models that I grew up with and believe that make me see the world as I do. And can I change that?
So how old were you when this happened?
See, I was in OAC. I was the last OAC. So I think that was like 18. So probably 18 or 19.
So what's amazing about that is how profound a realization that is, especially for someone who's that age. That's what I'm listening to this story going, like, what the fuck, man? Like, I'm thinking of myself when I was 18, like, Jesus. I mean, the idea that, I had to love myself in order to love other people. Like I mean, I talk to a lot of 40-year-olds that don't realize that, and so it's so interesting that on some level you knew that already. And your dream is what gave you access to it. I mean, is that how you see that? That's super interesting to me.
Yeah, I still don't fully understand it, because I wouldn't say at that moment I knew any of that stuff, because I had no role models to show that. So either it was a deep part of my being that knew that, or whoever that guy was that was in the dream, it could have been just one of those mystical experiences of a soul of some sort that gave it to me. Who knows? Because I woke up knowing it. And I never knew anything about dreams prior to that. I didn't look up dream dictionaries at all. I didn't know anything. And for it to just come so natural, there's something, say, is it a part of me, or did something was given in that moment that I took with me when I awoke? I don't know. And that's the mystery of these dreams, right? Like what plane of existence are we truly on?
So yeah, no kidding. Like it's so, and then I mean, where did you have another experience that was profoundly? I think you mentioned a couple.
Yeah, so that was the first one, and then from there, I used a lot of dreams to gauge who I was and like things I feared, And even like when I had issues, I was trying to figure out an issue inside me. I always use dreams to I figured out how dreams spoke to me, which was really cool. And I read a lot of, especially in the Bible about those dreams. I used a lot of that kind of understanding on how they interpreted dreams to understand how I could interpret dreams. And so I really went on that, and it was really good because it was really trial and error. And then I started interpreting or working with my friends' dreams to try to figure out, how, if this works for me, does it work for you? And a lot of times it did. So I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And it was really cool because they're friends. So it's like trial and error. I'm like, does this make sense? No. Does this make sense? Yeah. Oh, interesting. So you take that knowledge and you move forward. But the other profound dream that basically shook me to my core was when I had a precognitive dream. And I read those in the Bible, and I've read those in other literature of religions and stuff, like these precognitive dreams of the future really happened right in their journeys. And so
what is, I've never heard of that term.
Precognitive is basically dreaming of the future. So yeah, so if you probably know the story of Joseph and the Technicolor dream, right? Like he had those dreams that he was going to be a pharaoh, way back when, before he even became that, right? And he was going to save Egypt, right? He had those dreams way prior. So that was a precognitive dream. And so for me, I had this dream, and it was so weird. It was so vivid. It was very similar to the vividness of that first dream I told you. So for this dream, I was in this factory, and I was standing by the staircase, and these three gentlemen were walking up, and they're all smoking. And then the two gentlemen walk past me, and the third gentleman blew in my face. I fell over, and then I looked up and I saw this sort of the name of almost the business I was coming to. And then I sort of conked out or zoned out, and I woke up. But it was so different. Like, it sounds like a normal dream, like, oh, a weird dream. But the feeling of it was so completely different than other dreams I've had, except for the first one, right? Of that guy telling me to look inside. Mm-hmm. So I woke up and I just had this knowing that something was going to happen to someone that I cared about. And I couldn't put my finger on it. And so I went downstairs and said, Mom, something bad's going to happen to someone. I just can't figure it out. And at that time, my mom and dad were separated. So when I told her, she's like, no, it's not. You're crazy, blah, blah, right? Like, you just go back and do something else. Stop bugging me with these dreams you speak of. And then I'm like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. And then I'm like, so I just kept in the back of my mind. And then don't I get a call 2 days later from my grandma, because my dad was living with my grandma at that time. And doesn't she say, your dad had an accident a couple of days ago and was in the hospital? I said, come on. I was like, what happened? And she's like, all I know is he fell. I was like, oh, interesting. And I couldn't put it all together. I was like, okay, this makes sense. But why the three people? Why the smoke? I have no idea, right? So anyways, I wait for my dad to get up, and he was in a coma for a little while. And he got up and he woke up. And so I went to him and I asked him, so what actually happened? And what he said was, he worked in the boiler room as an engineer, and he had to basically go into another building. It was snowing at that time. And so he went to that building, and he was climbing up the ladder because the smokestacks were getting stuck. And so he needed to basically release the smoke so everything could move forward. Anyways, there's 3 valves that he needed to release the smoke to. And so he went up this ladder and manually released these valves. So the first 2 he did fine. The third one, when he did, the smoke blew in his face, and he fell over and landed on his head from the machinery. And that's the story. And I was like, oh my God, that correlates so well with the dream I just had. I'm like, this is crazy. And so from that on, I'm like, okay, the world isn't what I think it is, because I just experienced something that's not supposed to happen. You're not supposed to know the future like that. And I had no reason why to believe that would happen to my father. So I started seeing the world now differently, beyond just now it's not just about loving myself, but there's something else going on in this world beyond just me, right? There's something else really mysterious that is occurring. I'm like, I don't know what it is. And some people are trying to figure it out. People go to quantum mechanics or quantum physics and stuff to figure it out. But I still don't know. And it just makes me sit in that mystery. But that was another point in my dream that changed the way I saw the world. And I still am in awe in the whole phenomenon of it all.
Is there? Yeah, man, it's amazing when you have those moments that profoundly alter your worldview. Like I remember one time I was meditating, and I had this. So it's funny. I have these conversations with my daughter, who thinks basically that me and her parents are fucking hippies. Like she goes, she can't stand when we talk about anything quote spiritual. But so I was saying to her, like, it was a couple of years ago. I was meditating, anyways, and I felt. Cindy, my dead wife, I felt her presence there. And like, I don't know what it means. I have no idea what that was, but it doesn't really matter. The point is I physically felt something, like emotionally, physically, like it's all whatever. It was all linked, and I could feel it and whatever. And it's hard for me to even remember what that meant, except for the fact that it was really comforting. And so, and I like to this day, I don't know what it means, but it just makes you question what is real. Cause I remember talking to Chloe, my 15-year-old, about this, and like saying like, what is reality? Like, what the fuck is that even? What is it even? Like, like, yeah, like, I mean, so I felt something. Is that real? And of course to her, very, black and white, completely non-nuanced teenager way of looking at it. Of course it's not real. Right. And so we've talked about dreams. Are dreams real? Like if you have a dream that is so vivid that you experience the sensations and the sights and sounds and smells and all of that, is that real? Well, what makes it not real? It's such an interesting question.
A lot of people, when they talk about what is real, they go to their senses, right? I see it, or I feel it, or I can think this, but you can do all those stuff in your dreams. So what's the difference? And we know our dreams is just in our mind, right? So for the most part anyways. So you're just like, what is real then? What is reality? And it makes you just, there's so much gray, like, like there's no black and white when it comes to that. And a lot of people have a hard time dealing with that gray area. And this is where I love sitting, because in that area you can play, you can be creative in how you see things that a lot of people can't, right? They're so structured in their model of how people told them it was, that's the way they see it, because anything else will go against the grain. And a lot of people I think have the courage to be able to do that, because it takes a lot to go against your family's beliefs, to go against your community's beliefs, to be like ostracized. I remember when I was even thinking dreams had meaning, which isn't that crazy, right? Like a lot of people believe that, and a lot of but my friends at the time thought I was going nuts. They actually had intervention for me to say I was going crazy, because I was talking about dreams all the time and saying, man, this is so cool, like this is what it means and stuff. And they're like, no, it doesn't, shut up. Like, so it's just interesting, right? And so those relationships, as they move forward, sort of like fell apart, and they just didn't have the value, because they didn't. And that's a scary thing when you start changing your world perspectives. Those friends that you have, some of them will fall away just because they're not into that side.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I've had that same thing happen to me too. It's funny too, you talking about reality. Like, one of the things I try to explain to my daughter is, that stupid video on YouTube where like there's those guys dribbling the basketball and then the dude in the bear suit walks through them. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah. It's a psychology thing.
Yeah. Like, I mean, what's real? You didn't see the fucking bear, right? Like, but I noticed even today when I was walking home, like,
for those listening, it's called selective attention. Yeah.
Selective attention. Okay. But I noticed today, like when I was walking home, I was listening to a podcast, and I was like, and I tend to catch myself doing this, and I'm like, oh, let me just turn this off. And as soon as I turn the podcast off, because I've been trying a lot lately to just as expansively as possible take in all of everything around me, right? Like and as soon as I took my headset off, I could smell the grass, the freshly cut grass. I couldn't smell it at all before, and it was like, man, what do we miss? Or maybe it's not missing anything. I don't know. But I find, when I pause, and like, I guess one thing I'm really interested in lately is kind of like the idea of being present. And it sounds so fucking cliche, but I used to think it meant like being present was like being focused so you could do the thing you were doing as well as possible. But I really realize right now that, or I started to realize anyways, is that when you kind of stop and you try to expand your awareness and you take in as much as you can, like, you know, so instead of just walking over the bridge I walk over every day, just stop and try to see what you can experience, you know, and you realize there's this whole ecosystem underneath the bridge of all all this interplay of animals and plants, and you can literally watch it if you just stop and take the time to look. And I realized that, man, I think, you know, being present is actually about that. It's actually about taking in as much as you can in every moment. And it really can be, it can make, I'm really becoming quite convinced that every moment could be magical if you chose to look at it that way. So
that's probably what people do when they hit like nirvana and stuff. Just every moment is just bliss.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not there yet, you know, but I love the idea that there's something more, right? There's more that we can do to increase our joy each and every moment. And I think that's the coolest thing. Like there's hope, right? Like, it doesn't always have to be like this. You know, the suffering that we get from world stress, for all the different things going on, that it doesn't have to be like that. And
right.
to focus and say, like, I can change this. I just have to be motivated to try. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is like, and I learned the same thing as you, is slowing down. Like I go for walks every day, and there's moments where I'm just thinking about either school or, you know, podcast or something, right? Like something that I'm doing that's coming up. And then I'm like, I just walked for like 10 minutes and didn't notice one tree.
Yeah,
like, right. I'm like, what just happened there? So then I would go back. So I go back to almost train myself. And then I walk that path again to notice those trees and to sort of just like say, hey, you know, like you're walking for a reason, you know, slow down. Don't take things so seriously. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. And I think that's the issue with me, especially growing up with being like so driven by marks and the school system. I took everything so seriously. I took every mark so seriously. And now, like just finishing up the PhD, my goal the whole time, because in my MA, I lost my mind a little bit in there.
Yeah.
But in my PhD, like, I'm like, I don't want,
like stress wise,
yeah, I cared way too much. I was so stressed. I cared so much about that, getting the MA. And then my PhD, once I got in, I was like, you know what? I want to do this differently. I want to constantly see consciously if I can do school without going insane and putting so much stress on myself. So that's my goal. And this last year has been the best in the sense of really not taking it so seriously. It's like you're doing what you're doing and you know your stuff. So relax and just, you know, simplify your life and just calm down. Like none of it really matters in the end of the day. And you're like, oh, okay. And you do the best you can. And if whatever happens, happens. So that's like the focus this last year I've been on, and it's amazing. It's actually I'm calmer, and I probably do things better now because I'm not thinking about like what that goal is. Like I need to get this PhD, and now it's more about like, dude, it's a journey. And if I get it, great. And if not, hey man, at least I gave it my all. You know, like I'm not just lying down and watching Netflix. I'm actually doing it, but I'm not doing it so crazy that I'm losing myself. You know. I'm still finding the balance and stuff. And what a good book I was reading at the time that actually really helped me with that was the Bhagavad Gita. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah, it's a short read, but it's amazing. It's amazing. And basically the one thing it really teaches is that, you know, what I was talking about is that you have a goal and that's great, but don't get caught up in achieving that goal when you're on the journey for that goal. So it's like, you go towards, like for me, so like you go towards that PhD and you do everything you can, but then at the end of the day, whatever happens, let it be. And you're like, oh, you know, so it's like
I agree.
You're giving up the pressure of obtaining that goal, and you're just enjoying really the journey and realizing you're doing the best you can. And so you're feeling this like you're feeling love and peace as you do it. And at the end of the day, you know, I like that. And if I get my PhD or not, you know, like I had a good ride, you know, like, and I want to go out like this. I'd rather go out singing songs of praise and joy and love than I would being stressed and getting a PhD. You know, like It's just
Totally.
like, for me in that journey, because the MA was so crazy, like I wanted to do it again right. And I'm like, if I don't do this, like, if I don't do it properly this time, I feel like, what life's going to do is make me do a PhD again. And I don't want that. I don't want to have to go back around to learn this lesson. So
Yeah, no shit. Well, you know what I've realized is it's pretty much exactly what you're saying, but I have this tendency of doing these ridiculous like athletic pursuits. Like, and what I find is like, so this summer I rode my unicycle, like one wheel, 150 kilometers. And like, I was so focused on this achieving this stupid goal that, that the achievement of the goal, it's the moment that you've been waiting for when you actually achieve the goal is so fucking fleeting. Like it basically lasted for 10 seconds. And I was like, fuck, now what? And I was like, after that, I was like, I'm not doing this again. This is fucked up the way I went about this. Like, I mean, I would go on a ride. I remember this training ride I went on. It was like 90 kilometers. And I'm like, I had so much fucking emotional energy wrapped up in this dumb ride that I was like, fucking not having a panic attack or anything, but I was all anxious about it. And like, oh God, if this doesn't go right, what does this mean? Like, I raised some money for charity for this thing. And what if I can't do it? And blah, blah, blah. And then, I don't know, I started riding it all. It was really interesting actually, because it all just kind of went away. But yeah, so I realized everything I do now, man, it's about the journey. It's to fuck the goal. In fact, I'm really, it's interesting because that's one thing though. I think that a lot of people are, and I definitely still am, and I'm just something I'm working on right now, but I'm very attached to the idea that less so because I'm aware of it now, but still there's still some attachment to the idea that this way of thinking about things is how I motivate myself, like how I motivate myself to perform at a higher level than whatever. Like, so I can look around me and I can see lots of evidence that this fucked up way of thinking about achieving goals is working. Like I got a nice house, I got a good job, like all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, but I'm like, there has to be a better way to be going about this. And it's basically exactly what you're talking about.
Well, it's funny. It's like you hear in Shark Tank, there has to be a better way. And well, I think the fear is that if we let it go, what will happen to our lives?
Right.
And so we maintain it due to the fear of what may happen. It could be a complete, shit show and you could fall apart, or what could happen is you become even more joyful and you become a beacon of light to everyone around you. But that's the risk you take, right? And this is the hard part about changing models, right? Changing who we are, because there's a lot of unknown and we don't have a lot of people around for that guidance. So you're taking these steps really like on faith alone. And yeah, well, for me too, right? Like I look back in my life, I'm like, I was so, desperate for these marks and for teachers to love me and for my parents to love me. I did really well in school, and that got me a long way. Actually, it got me all the way to learn so many things that I probably may not have learned. But I think the question is, why is it changing now? So when I look at my life now, I don't say, oh my God, I wish I should have known this earlier. I'm like, no. Like, why is it changing now? And what does that mean for me as a person? It means that I don't need to be like that anymore. So I can let go a little bit. And that's what I'm doing right now in the PhD. It's to let go a little bit of what you think you need to be to have a desired outcome, and see if that changes anything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I went to like a Zen Buddhist retreat, just a day long thing. Actually, I only made it half the day before I fucking snapped. I don't know if you heard that. Yeah. So, but anyways, one of the things that was really interesting, actually wasn't that one, it was the one before, but I was talking to one of the people there about this idea about how you have to be a certain way in order to achieve the things you want to achieve. And he basically, what he said was, and I said, like, what if I give that up? Like, what replaces it? And he goes, are you open to considering that, like, when you release that way of thinking, the freedom from that way of thinking will allow you to create things so much more expansively that you can't even imagine it right now. And I'm like, it's like, I don't know, that sounds fucked up. No, but you know what? I actually do believe that. Yeah, so I've really been trying to do that. And it does work. Like it is, I find I guess the older I get and the more I learn and the more I experiment, I mean, I just get less and less attached to the outcomes, even at work. I mean, I find like that's one of the things I talk to my team about all the time is this is just a grand experiment, a grand series of experiments here. Like, I mean, and however it turns out, it'll turn out and we'll learn from it. And then we'll try some new shit. Like that's basically it. And we'll just keep doing that over and over again. But if something goes wrong and we all collectively fall into a heap and sob about it, I mean, that's learning. Like there's this whiteboard, we're going way off topic here, but there's this whiteboard on the wall at work. They have these up and, people write like questions on them. And it was amazing how this one question a couple of weeks ago was like, what would you try if you knew you couldn't fail? And I was watching what everybody wrote and I'm like, this is a whiteboard full of like shattered fucking dreams is what this is. All the shit that people were afraid to try because they were afraid of failing. Like, what the hell? Like, and I'm like, of course I wrote on the board, what might your life look like if you recognized that failure was a critical part of the journey? Like, hello, man. So anyways, back to dreams because it's super fascinating. But so you mentioned precognitive dreams. So is there like a large body of historical context for these dreams? I mean, is this something that's been talked about for the idea of precognitive dreams throughout history?
Yeah, so you see it in a lot of Native American cultures and tribes that believe in their dreams. They'll believe that these dreams they can foretell the future. And so when to plant, like I was just reading this, there's a tribe in, I forget where it is. But anyway, I was just reading this article about there's this tribe that has these dreams, and when they have these certain dreams with symbols, it's a sign of when to plant and when not to. And so it's about the future on like when to do certain things for your agriculture to get the best product. And so also when it comes to these, you see it in the religions, right? So the three major religions, right? They all sort of use the Old Testament. And so you have Joseph, precognitive dreams, Daniel, precognitive dreams, even the story of Jesus about with his father, they had precognitive dreams on when to move, right? Like it was giving them advice on when to move because it was telling them when certain people would be in a certain place. So it was very fascinating. So it's throughout our culture, many people's cultures, but for whatever reason, it changed along the way. I think because dreams became, once I think Western culture became something, dreams fell out of importance because people didn't know how to really interpret it and you couldn't really measure it. But what's interesting is there's one of my committee members when I was doing my MA, Dr. Carlisle Smith. He actually was doing studies in this area, and he wrote a book called Heads Up Dreaming, and it's basically precognitive dreaming. And throughout his life, he would know when he would get a grant and when he wouldn't before he would even get notification. He said it always came true. He said he knew some of the who would win certain political races and certain events that would happen in his life that seemed to be just trivial, but he would dream of them before it happened. And I think some people are just better at it than others for whatever reason. But the same thing in these historical contents is that there's these certain people that have these dreams. Even Pharaoh, I remember, so the story of Joseph, Pharaoh had a precognitive dream that the crops are going to be wiped out in 7 years, and there's going to be a 7-year famine. And so, even so, you don't have to be like religious to get these sort of thing, because he was having it and he didn't really know what it was. So I just think it's fell out a little bit, and it's kind of woo woo in a lot of people's eyes. But when you have your own experience, it changes everything. And same thing with the dreams of the deceased. When you have one, it changes the way you think about your loved one. And there's a different feeling, but it's hard to explain it to people who haven't had one of those experiences yet. Just because, they haven't really felt what it feels like to do that 180 because of a dream.
So fascinating. So what is the focus? I know you're working on grief dreams, but is there something more specific that you're, working towards for your PhD? And I guess, how much are you in this research that you're doing? How much are you drawing on these lessons from different cultures from the past?
Well, the sad thing was when I started this journey, so in my MA, there wasn't a lot of research out there. And I was helping the bereaved, trying to just, figure out my life at that time.
Mhm.
And they just kept bringing up these dreams. Some people were having negative dreams. Some people they wanted to know why they haven't had a dream. And I was like, I have no idea, but it's interesting because I only had positive dreams. So I went to the literature and tried to look and see like, well, what's going on here? And I didn't find anything to help them out. There's some stuff on themes, but it was poorly done. Like the research wasn't, greatly done. And that was really all there was. There wasn't really much anything else. And so I went to do my MA trying to figure out this whole topic. So in my MA, I looked at, what kind of common themes are people having? And then and can they be reliably scored, which is a big thing for research to be able to accurately sort of showcase these themes. The other thing, do dreams change over time? Because people were telling me dreams changed over time. And so for that one, I looked at a women's dream journal, and they did, right? They shifted as the individual's grief sort of shifted and healed, which I thought was really interesting. But I didn't really get a chance to answer the question. So that's why I need to do a PhD. So the PhD was, why are some people having dreams and other people's aren't? And why are some dreams negative? And some aren't. So those are the main ones that I want to get at, but I couldn't do in my MA just because I didn't have enough time. So now I was able to do that, which is really cool. And you probably wouldn't know, but when people die and they're spiritual, they can have complications because of these dreams. So let's say for not having a dream, I've heard this so much, it's crazy. So if they're not having a dream, some people may say, oh, it's because the deceased, they never made it to heaven. They must be in purgatory, or maybe they weren't good enough and they're in hell, so they can't visit me. Other people say, oh, like they made it to heaven, or the afterlife, but they just don't love me anymore. They're just, they got other things to do.
Jesus.
I know, right? And the last thing that I commonly hear is that they're holding back their visit because they're mad at me for maybe having to sell the house after his death or something, or their death.
Oh, can you imagine the emotional anguish about thinking that stuff?
I know, but this is real life. Like these are real people. And, the one thing I've learned about real people, or just people in general, they're all real, but people in general, is we tend to, when we don't know something, like my mom and my dad, we tend to put it on a negative reason. So why am I not having this dream? Oh, I don't know. There's no research. What do I do? It must be me. It must be something wrong with something, either me or them. Right. So because of that, I really wanted to do this research, and I found out just through it that the major predictor of having these dreams is dream recall, which is the simplest freaking answer that someone could give me. But I looked at attachment, I looked at openness to experience, I looked at grief, I even looked at spirituality, and age and gender. But the only significant predictor was dream recall. Those factors that I stated before, they can influence your dream recall, but it's dream recall that's the most important thing in general. So when those people come to me and say, why haven't I had it? Is it a sign that something's wrong? I say, look, what's your dream recall like? And they say, oh, it's not very good. And I said, well, the odds of you remembering a dream of them is very rare. That's hard. That's a hard thing to ask for yourself. I go, you're probably dreaming of them and you just don't remember it. And then that's a mystery of why I remember certain dreams over other. That's interesting. And there still needs to be more research on that. But for a lot of people, it actually provides them relief because, okay. So it has something to do with my recall. And there's ways to increase your dream recall to hopefully catch one of those dreams when they do occur. But it's very interesting how it helps them. And that was the whole reason why I did it, and be able to help them out with that was, one of the major successes. And I replicated the research so it was a human sample of spouses, of course, the human sample, but the deceased were basically deceased partners or spouses, and I replicated with animal loss, so people who lost a deceased animal, and it was the same sort of thing that occurred there. So it shows that there is actually a lot of truth to what's going on. So dream recall, who would have thought? But it's an easy answer, but it's something that people can take with them to help them not complicate their grief so much, because grief is hard enough, Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And I had that with my dad. It's like grief is absolutely insane, and we need to simplify our lives, and like putting these like weird or very negative reasons onto our dreams and our life, it just complicates it. And so now here we are, and we got some answers finally.
I would think it would be quite it would feel like quite a weight lifted off your shoulders to recognize that instead of like eternal damnation, you're just shitty at remembering dreams. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so what is it? What kind of factors influence dream recall? Like, I wonder, because you've also mentioned simplifying your life, and I wonder if you found or know of like how much that plays a factor in it. Like, how much of it is because our lives are so cluttered with so much thoughts and expectations and disappointments and baggage, and I mean, I wonder how much that has to do with it.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different theories and things on that, and some of them, as you're saying, are absolutely right in the sense of like the worrying, right? Like when you don't remember, well, how do I put this? One of the theories is when we wake up, we don't remember dreams is because we're so anxious of what's going on next. So we wake up and it goes out of our minds before we can even transfer it to long-term memory. And that's the issue. So when people wake up, what they normally do is I gotta go to the bathroom, or I gotta go to work, or I gotta do this, or I gotta take care of my kid, and they don't sit. And just sitting, you may be able to remember that dream, but because our lives are so hectic, we tend to like just like throw it away, and so the dream doesn't transfer to long term memory. And another theory that I state is that why one reason why we remember more dreams in REM than non-REM is because REM is very similar to our waking life. So people are saying that if you wake up in REM, you're more likely to remember the dreams or transfer it to long-term memory, or even the short-term memory. Sorry, just because it's so similar to waking life consciousness. So that's another sort of area in there. And there's just other people that, for whatever reason, remember dreams more often, and it could be related to personality. So people who are more open to experience, people who are creative, will remember their dreams more. And the other, I'll just say one last thing about that. Another thing is that we can actually increase and decrease our dream recall. So it's not like it's permanent. So if it fluctuates, and you can actually train yourself to, and if that's something you want to do, you can train yourself to actually have more dreams. And you just basically got to tell yourself, you've been trained all your life that dreams probably didn't mean anything. And so you got to train yourself that dreams are valuable. So when you have a dream, the best thing to do is to write it down, and then to talk about it with others, and to reread some of the dreams that you have. And that in itself is telling your mind, I want to remember these dreams, keep them, right? Like, don't just like, put them into the dumpster, right? Like, actually keep these experiences. And it's funny because I remember probably maybe 5 dreams a week. But when I used to, because when I heard that, I'll write down your dreams, I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I'll do that. And I was having like 3 dreams a night. It was crazy how many dreams I was catching. And then I would write them down, but then I would be so exhausted by the time, by the time I woke up in the morning, because I would have sporadic sleep. I'd be waking up and trying to go back to bed. So then I just write down the more powerful dreams that I have. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just like we can change that. So as much as it could be personality and when you wake up and all this sort of stuff, valuing them is the first thing, you need to do, to say like, actually, I want to remember these dreams and I want to give it the time. So when you wake up, rehearse that dream. Like, don't wake up and rush. It's like being mindful of what just you experienced for that split second, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because my wife, that's exactly what she does. Actually, she takes time when she wakes up in the morning, and oftentimes the reason is because she's considering the dreams that she's had, and she stays very quiet. And then normally what I'll do is I'll leap out of bed and go meditate, which is weird sequence of events when you think about it. Maybe I should just
let's rush to meditate.
Yeah, geez, that sounds dumb when you say it out loud. But hey, one last thing I would ask you is, is there a relationship in any way that you know of between like a psychedelic experience and dreaming?
I don't know. I haven't really looked at any of that research per se, but I'm guessing there's probably something similar in because some of the experiences, we had a guy on the podcast, the Grief Dreams podcast, and what's his name? Andy Zarumba. And he was talking about how he doesn't really remember dreams. He didn't remember any dreams of the deceased anyways. But when he takes ayahuasca, he has his experiences where he sees his deceased grandmother. And I'm like, oh, that's very interesting, because what the deceased grandmother was saying was very similar to what would happen in a dream, like the imagery.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, interesting. So what's actually working there? And is it similar to that? I don't know. But like what he was experiencing was very similar to what people would consider a dream that they would have of their loved one. So yeah, there's probably some, and I'm guessing different drugs and hallucinogens will produce different things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, hey, this is, so first of all, I guess, when does your PhD finish? How long does that take anyways?
Well, this is my 4th year. So it's taking me 4.5 years to complete. I'll be finished this December. So I just have to defend right now. I'm just waiting to defend. And then I'll be a doctor, Dr. Black. So I'm really excited for that. At the end of the day, it's cool, but, I'm just really excited that I got this research done, and we found some really interesting stuff that could help the bereaved as they move forward. And we'll see what happens. There's one thing I actually do want to mention. Talking about like sitting with the goals and stuff. There's so many people that ask me, what are you gonna do after? So many people, like, that's the question, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because my mind will go there too. Oh, what are you gonna do? And all of a sudden you become anxious and be like, what am I going to do? And then I'm like, no, it doesn't matter. Let the doors, so I keep on this. So remember I was saying I'm trying to enjoy the journey. I'm trying to actually reduce the stress. So I'm finding that, you have this goal, but for me, there's this resistance to appreciating achieving the goal. Like even that, right? So I'm like, I don't want to, what I'm going to do after it doesn't matter. I just want to be able to, take this all in for what it actually is. It's 8 years of work, and also, dealing with my own grief of my father, all of that, it's taken in all of that. And just realizing how powerful these moments are as you're coming to this door closing. And it's so interesting because, I was like, oh, wow. It's like there's that thing is like when a door closes, another one opens, mm-hmm. right? There's that saying. But I think what a lot of people do is when a door is about to close, people look for another door. They don't actually watch the door close. And there's something beautiful about a door closing. And that's what this is. It's like a chapter of my life is going to be closing. And how beautiful that is. Like, to really sit back and just look at yourself from a distance and say, man, that's crazy. You made it here. All that struggle, all that stuff that I had to go through just to even get here. And you did it. And look where you are doing it. You're not anxious. You're in a better state of love. And you've learned a lot about yourself along the way. So sit with this and celebrate this door. And you're like, oh, right. Yeah. Okay. And so I constantly have to remind myself to get back there, because there's so much pressure to see, what's this next door going to be for you? I'm like, dude, I'll figure that out when the door closes. That's where I am right now.
Yeah. I'm listening to this audiobook. So have you ever listened to read The Untethered Soul?
No.
So it's a book by a guy named Michael Singer. And, but basically it's all about, it's really kind of about the teachings of Zen, but it's just this really cool way. He's written it in a really approachable way, and it really helps you understand the thoughts versus the thinker and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a very empowering book. But he's got another one called The Surrender Experiment. And basically it's how this guy went from being I think he ended up getting his PhD in something, but anyways, he ended up running $1 billion software company, and he did it by just surrendering. So instead of putting up resistance and having expectations and all of these clinging to our personal preferences, he just decided to start surrendering more often to what the world was putting in front of him. And it's, and amazing things happen. And it's such a weird thing to wrap your head around, because we're so achievement oriented, and we're always about what's next. But you're right. If you're always worried about what's next, you can never celebrate what's now. And right now is the only thing that actually matters. So it's such a liberating thing to realize.
Yeah, and I wouldn't doubt it. It was probably the trick of it all. It's probably if this was a game, right? The trick of it all is that probably surrendering to that door opens that next door.
Yeah, right.
a lot quicker, right? So you're like, oh, Wouldn't that be something? You know, like your life actually becomes what you want when you can surrender to the door closing rather than looking for which one's opening.
Yeah. And I think for me too, what a part of it was recognizing that if I could reframe the stories I was telling myself about the past, then I could certainly reframe the stories I was telling myself about the future, you know? And
yeah, that's smart.
yeah. And so, because it's like, it's amazing how, as I've, been on podcasts and done lots of talking and all that stuff. And, I realized that these stories I would tell about the past, they change over time. And I sometimes I'd be thinking, does this even fucking resemble what happened anymore? I don't even know if it does. Like, it feels like it does, but it can't possibly. Like, there's got to be, my understanding of it has changed. Instead of looking at this, that former part of my life is like this dark period, when I started to look at it, like in terms of, while there was tragedy, when I recognized that you could hold the idea, two seemingly contradictory ideas, like it's a tragedy, but it was also a tremendous gift, right? Like, it took me a while to get to that point. But then when I realized that, obviously that colored how I looked at the past. So, and so it's just such an interesting thing, how much power we have to shape our worlds. And I just think it's really cool how your dream experience so profoundly impacted your waking life. And it's so, what other, like, it just makes me think, like, what other knowledge is in there that we just need to tap into? We haven't even scratched the fucking surface, man.
Oh, it's so true. And when it comes to these grief dreams, that's where the juicy dreams, like the good dreams are. Like, we talked about some stuff, but it's these grief dreams that they can change people. Like, I've seen it so often. Like, it's not even a fluke. But like, one dream can be like 10 years of psychotherapy. It does something to them. And you don't need to be spiritual or not. Like, you don't have to be spiritual to get one of these or feel one of these dreams and to make that completely 180 shift. And it's fascinating. And there's something going on. Like, I just don't know how to like really figure it out, but there's something going on in the dream that's almost eliminating or healing some of the trauma or the negative experiences within our own body and mind. Like, it shifts us out. And that's what actually happened when my dad died. I was in this like super like depressing state. Like, the whole world was just like gray, had no joy. And then I got one of these dreams of him being able to say goodbye, and then I loved him. And when that happened, I woke up like a new man. Like, it was like, I can't even explain what it truly is, what it was, but it totally shifted me. And I'd never really had, like, I've had tears and stuff like throughout, but I felt joy in my life. And like, it regulated my emotions so much that I wasn't stuck in that sadness. And I think a lot of people will have these experiences where it just changes them. And you're like, there's something going on here. And if I was, there's so many different stories I could tell you on like kind of like paranormal experiences people have when it comes to these dreams. But the major thing is, if I was, someone that really cared about, what is reality, I would look to these dreams to sort of see what's actually going on, because they are absolutely very mysterious.
Awesome. Well, that's a great place to end it. So listen, man, thanks so much for this conversation. I mean, it was super fascinating to me.
No problem. Well, thanks for having me on. And I'll just quickly mention, if people are having these dream experiences, or they know people who have, just check out griefdreams.ca. It's basically it's a website with all the stuff on it, educational stuff for you. I answer common questions. I mentioned the podcast we have, and all the other stuff's on there. So, check it out, and feel free to email me if you've had your own dreams. I always love hearing them. Awesome. Sounds good, man. And good luck defending your PhD thesis. Thank you. And good luck walking over that bridge. Yeah. Thanks, brother. In a right mindset. Yeah. In the right mindset. Awesome. I really enjoyed this. Thanks a lot. Hey, and there you go. That was a cool conversation. Thanks, Josh, for doing that. I loved pretty much everything about that. It was really nice to talk dreams and to
Understand once again that I'm fucking unusual with my negative grief dreams, but I'm just teasing. But yeah, I had never heard of precognitive dreams. They're just fascinating to explore, and I really like how we talked, from a historical context. Really, just loved everything about that conversation. So again, I wish you luck on your defense of your PhD thesis, and thanks for coming on the show, and good luck with your research. And I'm so happy to know that there are people out there like you. Serving people in the way that you are through one of the most challenging emotional experiences that somebody can face, which is grief. And I say that from personal experience. So good luck, brother, and let's stay in touch. Thanks for listening to the Emotionally Excellent Man Show. Now, go own your shit like the powerful, handsome boss man that you are.